In today's video, how do you switch from a meal plan to a macro-based diet?
All by myself.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is Paul Ravella from ProPhysique.com, and today's question is about you switching from a meal plan to a macro-based approach. And if you're interested in this type of content, nutrition, training, how to build some muscle, how to look good naked, well, hit subscribe. That's what we do here. And today's question, it does come from my Instagram direct message. So if you're following along on my Instagram, what I typically do is scroll through and find good questions, and this was a great one. Why? Well, because first of all, it comes from a competitor, someone that tends to compete in physique competitions. That's what I love to do. It's what I do as a coach, and I'm around the sport so much that I love the process of helping people. And a lot of what I've done over the last decade is helping people who've come from other styles of coaching where meal plans, often cookie cutter meal plans, are given out. And getting those people to transition to a flexible diet or macro-based diet, it's not always easy. And it's not always the same approach that I take now that I used to take. And let's talk about the question. I'll read it here for you. My question for you is, do you have any tips for experienced bikini competitors transitioning from a meal plan approach during prep to now entering a macro-based plan during prep? I have a good knowledge as to what macro ratios work for my body, and I'm incorporating mostly the same foods as I previously had on the meal plan. Lean proteins, complex carbs, healthy fats, veggies, etc. The main difference I'm using now is, rather than a complete set plan, I adjust my proteins if needed between chicken, turkey, Greek yogurt, rice, cakes, for rice, potato, bread, etc. I'm weighing all my foods and tracking on MyFitnessPal. I also have more freedom and feel much less restricted following a macro approach. All right guys, so a lot has been made over the last decade or so about flexible dieting and about macro tracking, and for good reason. It's a really good philosophy, but I think what happened initially was there was this push against meal plans. And for those of us that use a meal plan to get to our goals, well, it's not such a bad thing. For a long time though, I feel like there was this stigma that if you used a meal plan or your coach gave you a meal plan, well, that was a red flag. And for good reason. A lot of the teams of the last decade that would often work with 1,000 or more clients, I'll call them coaching mills, would put everyone on the same set meal plan. Out of 1,000 clients, you're gonna have a few people succeed. And so what happened is they would prop up the clients that were successful. Everyone would go, oh, that's the coach I need to work with. And therefore they would all be on the same meal plans and same diet. And what happened is you had a lot of competitors that quit the sport early, that had health issues from that, that had eating disorder behaviors associated with that, and were kind of left in the dust because these coaches that were doing this didn't really have the knowledge or the skill set to help them once they had put on a bunch of body fat and were not successful dieting on the same meal plan. So there was a big push for a long time to learn about flexible dieting and macro tracking. And that's when I entered the sport. My first coach gave me a plan that was based on macros. Now, this was hard. I'm gonna be honest, it was hard as shit. When I got my macro plan from my coach, I did not know what I was doing. I did not really understand how I was supposed to hit 250 grams of protein in a day. It took me probably a week to 10 days to even start getting in the ballpark. But that week to 10 days was an education. I started having to look up nutrition facts. I had to go on the RDA website. I had to go on websites, look up nutrition facts. I had to learn how to weigh my food. That was a huge education. But what it did for me was unlocked my ability to be aware of what's going on with my nutrition. And that's why, as a coach, I prescribe macros. The macronutrients that I prescribe are going to be based on the individual's characteristics, needs, and goals, okay? So there are no cookie cutter plans that are created. However, what I often hear from competitors or clients of mine is, could you just give me a meal plan? I would much prefer that. And for a long time, I would often create a basic meal plan based on the macronutrient profile that I felt was effective. However, my philosophy has really changed. And the reason being is I don't want someone to not learn the skills that I learned, because that's what makes this lifestyle sustainable. When someone treats food as binary, good or bad, they're put on a meal plan where they only eat these foods. What happens when they get off plan is they lose their minds. Why? Because the feeling is, hey, as soon as I go back on track, I don't get to eat these foods anymore. I might as well just go all in for the day, for the week, for the month, and I'll worry about the diet later. Instead, we learn about flexible dieting and macronutrient tracking. And that's all well and good. That's the philosophy that I espouse. But how do we make that transition? Well, I think the first and most important thing you need to do is realize that you don't have to stop using your meal plan. If you take the meal plan that you're on and just start plugging in the macronutrient values, well there, you're now tracking macros. That's it. That's all the transition it takes. From there, you can start to just make some exchanges in the foods that you would prefer to have. For example, if you've been eating tilapia for 6 months and you would rather eat dirt than eat tilapia, well, why don't we just look at something that's gonna have a similar macronutrient value, okay? Lean meats, eggs, other fish, anything like that can be used. There is no magic food. There are no foods that are a requirement to get lean. Likewise, there are no foods that you have to completely avoid to get lean. Are there better choices? Yes. Are there micronutrients and fiber to consider? Yes. Is volume important? Of course. Is personal preference important? Of course. These are all things to consider. This is why when you're transitioning, you should start to gradually include things that you enjoy. So if you've been eating tilapia for a long time and you're like, man, I'd love to have a juicy steak, well, go to the store, look up some lean cuts of steak and start including that, okay? Now, the next question is, should you weigh your food before or after you cook it? It doesn't matter. The nutrition value changes. That's probably one of the most common questions I get. If you cook something, it weighs less because it dehydrates. Therefore, you can look up the nutrition for something that's cooked, or you can look up the nutrition for something that's raw. If you buy food and it's raw on the package, that's the nutrition for that food raw. If you cook it, that nutritional value has changed. So as long as you understand this, you can track it however you want. You can cook it first, or you can weigh it raw and then cook it. I find it's much easier to weigh cooked food. Raw food, disgusting, and obviously you don't want to get germs. So the next question is, what is the process like for a competitor? Well, first of all, understanding that if you're going to compete, there are just better choices to make in general, okay? We're obviously not going to be swapping out things like rice and broccoli for things like French fries and cheesecake, okay? That's not going to be a fair trade. But you can start to work things in that you enjoy, like quinoa, like sweet potatoes, other options, other things that are high in volume. And as soon as you take out the idea that foods are good or bad, it completely opens up your mind to the idea of being flexible and tracking. Even post-show, your experience is going to be so much better because you don't look at the deadline of the show as the floodgate opening for you being able to eat like a normal human being again and just not tracking anything. No, we can have a successful transition into the off season. You as a competitor can have a better prep. And when it comes to the foods you choose in prep, understanding that keeping them consistent throughout the process is going to keep digestion similar. It's going to keep body composition similar. So when you start to have these big fluctuations, as some flexible dieters do, there can be a big variation in how you look. So when peaking, it does become important to make sure that you're having consistent food sources so that you have predictable results, okay? Competitors, much different than lifestyle, okay? We're looking for a specific result, and we get a little bit crazy when our body fat gets very low and we get closer to that stage weight. Hopefully this answered your question. Basically, it just comes down to take your meal plan, plug it into a macronutrient calculator. You said you were already doing that. Just start incorporating foods that you enjoy. And if you want to go out to eat and you're not in prep, you can look up restaurant nutrition information, or you can bring your food scale with you and just get a steak and a potato and weigh them while no one's looking. All right, guys, that's going to be it for me today. Hope you're having an awesome day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.